we are now recording. All of that introduction is going to be only known to you folks. So anyway, and so I left Cal State Fullerton in 1983 after boosters started asking me if I could do this training on peak performance for their teams. And before you know it, I went out and started my own business in 1983, and I've been doing this ever since. So it was really an indirect way that I got into professional speaking and training. My orientation was always as athletic coach, and then I saw the need in business. So let's begin. And I want to begin the program by telling you a story of a circumstance that happened to me. And then we'll relate this to how this is going to be a benefit to you. So I am a private pilot. Don't know if there's any pilots in the audience. And I fly what's called a Bonanza, which is a very nice high-performance single-engine airplane. And I'm going to tell you about the first time that I was ever going to be in the clouds by myself without an instructor. Now, I fly out of John Wayne Airport, and this is I was going to fly from John Wayne over to Santa Monica to an organization called Angel Flight. I don't know if you've heard of Angel Flight. It's a volunteer pilot organization where the pilots volunteer their time and expenses for medical transportation. It was, excuse me, it was forecast to be 1,000-foot ceiling. What this means is that at 1,000 feet, 100% of the sky is covered with clouds. I would be in the clouds. I was bringing my marketing director with me, and this is the first time that I was ever going to be flying in clouds by myself without an instructor. So I looked at my passenger and I said, I'm going to be a little bit busy on this flight, won't be able to talk to you much. Translation is, this is my first time in the clouds by myself, good luck. So I get to the airport, it's a cloudy day. Ground control clears me to taxi and hold short of the active runway. So I am taxiing down Charlie taxiway, hold short at Kilo it's called, and I'm holding short. And all of a sudden, now, John Wayne Airport is a commercial airport, and all of a sudden, a tower calls my aircraft, Bonanza 9198 Quebec, and they pause. I'm hoping that they're going to say, we're too busy for small aircraft on this busy day. They don't say that. They say, cleared for takeoff. So I get onto the center line, I give full power, and I am at liftoff speed. I pull back, I make some adjustments. It's getting kind of hazy, getting cloudy, 500, 800, at 1,000 feet. At 1,000 feet, it's like someone put a blanket over my face at 1,000 feet. At 1,000 feet, this is what it looks like right in the clouds. Let's look closer right there, and this is what I see. And I'm going to tell you that I remember it like it was yesterday. I am absolutely terrified. I was so terrified that my legs were shaking hysterically on the rudder pedals. I didn't dare look at my passenger because I didn't want to see what my passenger looks like looking at the pilot freaking out. And I remember my thinking was, I'm either going to do this or I'm going to die. And this wasn't much long after JFK Jr. had died in his aircraft accident. And as it turns out, over 80% of small aircraft accidents are what's called VFR in the IMC. What that stands for is visual flight rules. And you can see, and then the weather deteriorates like you see on the screen, and this is called instrument meteorological conditions. The reason it's so dangerous in conditions like this is because I can't tell what the aircraft is doing when I have no visual reference. I have nothing to be in reference to, and the key is I can't trust my own senses to tell me what the aircraft is doing. And so let me give you an example about how easy it is to deceive human senses. So, and this will also bring a to the forefront reference points. So when you look at this airplane, what would you say the distance is from the ground to that wingtip? And so if you think about it for a bit, I don't have the message chat on, so I won't see your responses, but I don't want to mess with the recording. Typically what I get back is 6 feet, 8 feet, something like that. And I asked what the key here is not what the answer is. The key is, how did you arrive at that decision, at that guess? And the answer to that is that your brain has a neurological network, a bundle of neurons that is accessing a stored memory. you have a memory of small aircrafts. Either you were in one, or you've seen one, or you've been at the airport. Even if you've seen a picture of a small aircraft, that serves as a neurological bundle that when I show you the picture of a small aircraft, your brain immediately activates that, and you come up with your guess of 6 to 8 feet, 12 feet, whatever it might be. So the key point here is, what are you in reference to? You're in reference to your memory of a small airplane. Now watch what happens to your reality when I change how you observe this, when I change what you're in reference to. How about now? Check that out. That arrow is the same size as that arrow. But now, of course, you've gone from 6, 8, 12 feet to maybe 2 or 3 feet as your observation. What's important is this. When you change your reference, your perception also changes. And that becomes very vital for us. And so let me show you another example of senses. And when we rely on our senses, we're going to be in trouble because our senses are very weak and very limited. How about this? Here's the question. Is square A darker than square B? Now, not the letter A and the letter B, the squares themselves. Is square A darker than square B? Now, most people are going to say yes. And I'm going to say, well, how certain are you that square A is darker than square B? What I typically get is 100%. Square A is darker than square B. I don't know what your psychological babble you're throwing at us, but A is darker than B, period. Obvious, right there in front of me. And then I ask, would you put $100 on A being darker than B? And many people are going to say, yeah, A is darker than B. So keep this in mind, that you look at this with absolute certainty that A is darker than B. Now, what I'm about to tell you is that that is not true. A and B are identical. And I know it doesn't look like that, but they are absolutely identical. The key is the references. A is in reference to the white space and the white squares, the light squares. And with our millions of years of evolution, the rods and cones in our eye distinguish the shading in reference to the color, and we see that as dark. B is in reference to the dark squares, and we see this as light. All I need to do is change the reference point. So this will never change, but what I did was I copied this, and you have this on page 2 if you went ahead and downloaded your worksheets, 2 worksheets. And so what I did was I took a picture of this, I copied it, and I cut out square B. Then I laid it right on top of where this is, and I changed its reference by moving it. When I moved square B to be in reference to the white squares in the white space, it looks to us like it's changing colors right in front of our eyes. It never changes colors. It changes what it's in reference to, and I took a video of this. Let's watch this video. Watch how this looks like it changes colors immediately. Is that crazy? Is that wild? It never changed colors. It went from being in reference to the dark to being in reference to the light. We have very limited senses. We can't trust our senses. Try it here. Count the black dots. Any difficulties there? They're jumping all over the place, aren't they? So I'm in the clouds. I'm thinking I'm either going to do this or I'm going to die. And then you talk about being committed. There is no option. And then my thinking started to change. I started to think, well, I've been in worse weather than this with an instructor, and I've flown the aircraft. Imagine that my passenger was a flight instructor. What kind of a conversation would we be having? And the conversation we would be having would be this: stay on your system of instruments. These are my instruments, and I'm going to focus on that one right there. That's called an attitude indicator, which means it's a gyroscope, which means rigidity in space. And I'll give you a blown up diagram of this. And what you see is blue to the top and brown to the bottom. And there's a miniature airplane right in the center there. Just by looking at this one aircraft instrument, I can tell exactly the position of the aircraft. And the magic here is to make sure that I am disengaged from how my body is telling, what my senses are telling me. And if I see this on my attitude indicator, I had better want to be in a climbing left turn, because this is showing a climbing left turn. And so even if I feel like I'm in a descending right turn, I have to disengage from my sensing and stay disciplined to my instruments. And so I did that, and I actually got confidence in the flight. And one of the most beautiful things to happen to any pilot, particularly when you're in the clouds, is when you break out of the clouds and right in front of you is the airport that you intended to go to. By the way, if you haven't heard by now, over here, this is where Harrison Ford landed, on this taxiway over here. Here's 20 left. I'm on 20 right here. It was 19 at the time. Actually, they changed it. Can you believe it? California shifted. But anyway, and so I don't take this lightly, even on a clear day. I think it's one of the miracles of flight. But the key is that I had a system of instruments that I followed. By following these systems of instruments, it gives me a predictable result. As a matter of fact, I know how fast my climb is going to be by what setting I put in. It's very predictable. Now, that's what this program is about. This program is about a system for elite performance. There's going to be one takeaway in this program. This one takeaway is something that behavioral dynamic that you did not have when you attended this webinar, that you will have in place when I'm finished. It's this one behavioral dynamic that has a chance to be significant in your life. And I always ask audiences when I'm live in front of them, what do you think the chances are about what you're going to experience in here? What do you think the chances are that it can have a significant impact in your life? Any audiences, they say high, it's high, it's high. And then I do what's called a pattern interrupt. Actually, it's very low. It's more likely that what you're going to experience is going to be entertainment. However, it's possible that what you experience in here for the remaining amount of time that we have, it is possible that this can have a significant impact in your life, and in some cases be a life-changing behavioral dynamic. That's what we're going for. But we need a system, and this system that I'm going to share with you is the one takeaway, and it comes towards the end of the program, and it will result in 3 words, and these words are peace of mind. So the question to you is, how many of you could use help with peace of mind? And so what goes into having peace of mind? And in my opinion, there's 3 different areas of our life that need to be fulfilled, all 3 areas. And that would be your health, your business, and your personal life. So these are the 3 areas of application. Your health. If your health, to me, health is the foundation. This is the most important application. If you're not in good health, you're not going to have success and fulfillment and peace of mind. If you don't have energy, you're not going to have peace of mind. If you don't feel well, you're not going to have peace of mind. So the very first area of application would have to be in your health. If you're in a struggling relationship, you're not going to have peace of mind. If you're depressed, you're not going to have peace of mind. I happen to be very blessed. I've been very happily married for 15 years, 18 years total, but nonetheless. So the second area of application would be in your relationships. Third area of application would have to be in your business. Those are the 3 areas of application. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to put blinders on and to think of an area in your life that you want to have improvement, and participate with the rest of this webinar with that area in mind. All right, so now who would you say your biggest competitor is to reaching your goals in whatever area you have in your mind, your health, your business, your personal life? Is it another company? Is it the environment? Is it the political uncertainty of the White House? Is it economic cycles? Is it the area of the country that you live in? No. Your biggest competitor is yourself. So this program has 2 parts. The first part is to identify what does it mean to be my own biggest competitor. And the second part is to, once we see what it means to be my own biggest competitor, how do I successfully compete with myself? So that's what we're going for. Let's roll up our sleeves and let's get to work. So here's a startling comment, and think about this. Now I am hearing some background, and I'm not sure why I have background noise, because I believe that I have everyone muted, and I also have the ability to unmute yourself if you have a question. So that sounds like it just took it off. So I think we're okay. All right. So anyway, here's my startling statement. You have far more capacity to create the circumstances and events in your life than you are aware of. I'm going to be referring to this several times. You have far more capacity to create the circumstances and events in your life than you are aware of. And the reality about this program is proof of that claim. So the first point of looking at how we are as human beings and how we compete with ourselves is looking at this. The way that you think affects how you feel, and that affects what you do. Let me say this a couple different ways. The way that you think affects your physiology. Everything that happens to us, all the moods that we have, the way that we feel, the decisions that we make, the choices, the actions, is all driven by brain chemistry. Brain chemistry dictates body chemistry, dictates physiology. No one is teaching how to emotionally regulate our brain. Nobody is teaching what we can control about how our neurons are firing and how we think. So until today, that is, because you're going to get a dynamic that'll help you influence this dramatically. But when I look at think, feel, and act, one way to approach this is that we know that human beings are going to resist doing activities that we don't feel like doing. For example, if you don't feel like getting up at 3:50 in the morning and exercising, you're not going to do it. If you don't feel like avoiding flour and sugar, you're not going to do it. If you don't feel like spending time with your family, you're not going to do it. Basically, our first point says, you and I are going to resist doing activities that we don't feel like doing. Now, many times there's trainers in the room. Trainers come up to me all the time and they say, I agree with your first point. We know how to teach our team to do everything they need to do to be as successful as they say they want to be, if they would just do what we've trained them to do. So I thank the trainers for their agreement. Then I ask this question, what do you turn to enhance the results of your training? The most common response that I get is we turn to goal setting. Now, how do you feel about goal setting? You know, how many of you believe that goal setting works? Well, here's the reality. The reality is that goal setting doesn't work. Now, before there's a riot or a what did they do in protest? Let me give you a disclaimer. Goal setting is a major part of my recommendations. However, not by itself. If all you did is set goals, here's what you're going to find. The top line, these are your goals. This is your plan. These are your intentions. This is what you want to accomplish. Now, there's another word that goes in this line. I just cringe when I hear this word. The word is potential. Reason that I cringe when I hear the word potential is because what you're capable of doing doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that bottom line. What is your actual performance? Now, can we talk about this for a second? Have you ever had this happen in your life where you said you were going to do something and you wanted to do it and you didn't do it? Why does this happen? And as I talk about this, think about the area of your life where you want that improvement. So why does this happen? Why is there a gap between what someone's capable of doing, what they intend to do, and what they actually do? Well, I'm going to go outside of your industry and talk about an experience that I had many, many years ago. I was doing my program for a mortgage company in San Diego when the interest rate on a 30-year fix was at 8.5%. Let's go back in time. In 1982, the interest rate was 16.09%. How many of you remember that marketplace? You remember that? Here's a graph that'll bring back the memories. And there was a trend going down. In 1986, the interest rate had dipped down to about 13%. In 1980, that was 84 or so, it dipped down to about 13%. In 1986, it had dipped down to about 8.5%. And this company was a single-family residential resale lender, and they put an ad in the newspaper for refis, and the phone was ringing off the hook. Now think about this. The interest rates on the 30-year fix, 8.5%. Just a few years ago, it was more than double that. The phone was ringing off the hook. The lenders were getting all of this market-driven refi business. They were busy. Now the management saw how they were doing business, saw what was in their pipeline, got very nervous and called a meeting. In the meeting, the management said, we've got a problem here. You need to realize that, yes, we live in a cyclical marketplace. Yes, the interest rates are low right now, but what's the next trend? They're going to go up. Look at all the business in your pipeline. It's all interest-sensitive business. In addition to handling all the market-driven refi business, you also need to go out there and prospect for purchase business. When those interest rates go up, if you haven't been developing the relationship with the people that can give you purchase business, you're not going to have any business in your pipeline when the market-driven refis die down. And the lenders, this was an experienced group, they said, that's right, we do. And they said that they would go talk to 20 new people this week that could give them purchase business. They intended to talk to 20 new people, plus handle all the market-driven refi business. They said they were going to do it. They were motivated to do it. They were excited about doing it, and they didn't do it. Why didn't they do what they said they would do? Well, let's ask the lenders. Why didn't you prospect? Here's what they said. I was going to, but I was just too, what's the word? Too busy. Now, why would they think that they were too busy to prospect, to do what they said they would do? Let's go into their minds. Let's ask them. So check out what they're in reference to. Lender goes into the office. They're intending to make their calls. They want to do it. They're intending to do it. They're motivated to do it. All of a sudden, the owner of the company comes over and says, there's a problem on one of your deals. It's a buy down. The borrower is moving from a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, buying down to a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. And I don't think we can sell this loan on the secondary market as an owner-occupied. You need to verify it's going to be owner-occupied. Now, the content of this example isn't what's important. What's important is the way that the lender is thinking and what they're in reference to. And the lender is thinking, I know that I said I'm going to prospect, but I've got a priority here. I can't be worried about the possibility of new business when I have a prominent existing business. I've got to take care of this right now. So I'm going to prospect, but I'm busy right now. So they handle that. They come back. They're ready to prospect. They're motivated. Something else comes up. There's a crack in the driveway and in the foundation of another property of a deal in progress. They need to get a geology report right now. So they're not going to be able to do this prospecting, but they're busy. They have a priority. They handle that. They're all set to get back to their intention of prospecting. Something else comes up. Underwriting wants bank statements on this borrower. They don't want to get bank statements because it shows declining income. They have to see if they can salvage that deal. They turn around from there. This borrower just forgot to mention a bankruptcy. Have to see if they can salvage that deal. Over here, there's a list pendants on this property. They can't get a clear title. Have to see if they can salvage that deal. One thing after another, and before you know it, they've run out of time. And they believe that the truth was that they were just too busy to prospect. Now, how many of you can identify with that in your own set of circumstances? Even though I don't have it set up to see hands raised, I will at the end. I can see right through the computer and see you raising your hands physically. Now, let me show you something about your perception. I'm going to ask you to consider the possibility that you can't trust your perception of your surroundings. It's just like you were certain that A was darker than B. I'm going to ask you to consider the possibility that with the limits of human senses, you can't trust the reference that you're just too busy. Let me show you one more example about the limits of human perception. I hope you can see this. I don't see my camera. I'm showing you my hands are empty, and I'm going to snap a finger, make a fist, and I pull out a scarf. So hopefully you can see what I'm doing here. Now I'm going to make it disappear. I make a fist, tuck it into my fist. It's not going in my ring. It's not going. I'm not wearing sleeves. It's disappearing in my fist. It's not here. And on 3, 1, 2, 3, it disappears. Now, when I do this in live audiences, I ask them to raise your hand if you see empty hands. And so what they don't realize is that my hands are not empty, but this is beyond human perception until I point out something to you. And so watch this. Here's how you do it. Now, you got to promise to keep this confidential because it's a standard magician's trick. If it gets out that I showed you this, they'll make my card disappear. So you got to promise to keep this confidential. By the way, a magician was traveling down the road, and all of a sudden he turned into a driveway. That's pretty bizarre, isn't it? All right, so watch this. I'm wearing what's called the Benet thumb tip. Inside of the thumb tip is the scarf. This is how this works. I sell these on my website, by the way, for $8, includes the scarf. So if you get one of these and your colleagues ask you, well, what'd you learn on the program? Watch this. If you do this, just make sure you practice, because this is a dead giveaway. My hands are empty. Now, what's that? Now, I'm about ready to make a major point. I show you my hands are empty this time. What's the only thing you see? It sticks out like a sore thumb. So if you didn't see this the first time, and it's tough for me on this webinar to really see how you're interacting with this, but when I do this in live audiences, they don't see it the first time. They clearly see it the second time. What's that tell you about reality? Reality isn't what's different. What's different is not what is going on outside of you. What's different is you. You are what's different. The way that you're observing this. So somebody must have unmuted themselves, because I'm hearing background noise. So let me put it on mute again. Mute all, and you cannot unmute yourself. So that should do it. Okay, so here we go. So anyway, what's different is not about what's happening outside of you. And I tell this to my one-on-one coaching clients all the time. It's not about outside. The outside causes don't cause anything. Outside circumstances are a reflection of your thinking, a reflection of your approach, a reflection of you. You want to change something on the outside, you have to change what's in your mind first. Socrates, I believe, said this, that all things are created twice, first in mind, first in thought, then in reality. So anyway, since perception is the key, let's see how perceptions are formed. What is this line, concave or convex? Now, you can't answer that until you have a reference point. So let's take a reference from the A side. Now, what is this line, concave or convex? Now you need to know the difference between concave and convex. So here's how a perception is formed. What you do to form a perception is you look at the facts, you look at what the object is, and you examine it. Well, it's bending towards me at the top. The line bows towards me at the bottom. See how it bends away from me in the center? That's the definition of a concave line. So how certain is A that this is a concave line? Well, A just looked at all the evidence and interpreted the evidence and came to a correct conclusion that the truth is that this is a concave line. Now, what if I were to go to A and say that this is not a concave line, it's convex? Well, I'd be in difficulty here, because let's say A is open-minded. A believes that the truth is this is a concave line. Let's say A is going to re-examine the facts. It's bending towards me at the top, towards me at the bottom, bowing away from me in the center. The only conclusion that A can make is that this is, I'm sorry, you're wrong, and resistance is what follows. And so, but what about B? Now B, the facts are not going to change. What's changing is the reference point. What's changing is the observation, not the facts, not the outside. The outside condition remains the same. So B looks at this and does the same thing that A does. B looks at it and says, well, it's bending away from me at the top, bending away from me at the bottom, it's bowing towards me in the center. That's the definition of a convex line. So what is the truth? Is this line concave or is this line convex? Well, look at your notes. And on the first page of your notes, look at Roman numeral 3, just below the center. And off to the right side, would you write this in about the truth? The truth is not relevant, or the truth doesn't matter. The issue is not what the truth is. The issue is, does what you're paying attention to, now listen to this very carefully, does what you're paying attention to support you in taking the actions that you need to take to reach your goals? That's what the key is. Now, I'll come back to this. I mentioned a couple of times in my introduction, which did not get recorded, unfortunately, my mistake, but I've mentioned that my program is based on laws of science. It's based on two things. One is laws of science. And I happen to, in addition to my research at Rutgers University, at Springfield College, and at Caltech, I happen to be living in Southern California in a hotbed of some of the world's greatest minds. This is Dr. Larry Cahill, who's world-renowned in neurobiology at the University of California, Irvine, very local for me. This is a goat's brain. This is a human brain. So it's ongoing research, and it never ends. And it's if you're familiar with the term asymptote, asymptote says that if you have a straight line, a curved line will never reach into infinity. That if that straight line across the top is mastery, It's always an approach to mastery, constant improvement. Japanese call that Kaizen. Here's another, Dr. Paul Davies, no relationship, same last name, but I put his picture up there just to show the breadth of the sciences. And the other thing that my program is based on is best practices of elite performers, people that everybody would recognize are the best in the world in their category in what they do. And so what we find is that the elite performers don't always wake up thinking, what a great day it is to be alive. Sometimes they wake up and they're kind of aggravated. Have you ever been aggravated before? Sometimes they wake up and they're kind of whiny. Any whiners on the call? When their thinking doesn't support them, here's what they do. They take an opposite point of view. This is referred to as flipping. I call it the stop technique. Now, this is absolutely spectacular. This could be life-changing. The stop technique, flipping a point of view that doesn't support you, flipping to an opposite point of view that does. In fact, I give this as a thought record exercise in my one-on-one coaching clients. But let's look at an example of this. I stand in front of you and I say, health is my number one value. Now, I love what I put down the side of your handouts by Ralph Waldo Emerson. What you do, speak so loudly, I can't hear what you say. And so the fact that I say health is my number one value really doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is, what do I do? And I say, I'm going to get up at 3:50 in the morning. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to exercise. I'm excited about doing this. I intend to do it. I want to do it. I set the alarm for 3:50. I intend to do this. The alarm rings at 3:50. Do I get up and go to the gym? It depends on which side I'm on here, what kind of thoughts I'm having. If I'm on the A side, I might be thinking something like this. I'm tired. My back hurts. Last time I worked out through a pain in my back went out. I lost a week of production. Listen to this now. I've worked out 18 of the last 21 days. Equally as important in a fitness program is rest. I need to sleep in. Now that might be absolutely true. Absolutely true. But what did you just write down about the truth? What did you write down? The truth is not relevant. The truth doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is if that's what I'm paying attention to, I am not going to get up and go to the gym. So here's the stop technique. I first of all recognize I have a limiting thought. I stop the thought and then flip to an opposite point of view. 100% of the time, I have a better day when I started off with a workout. There you go. I go downstairs to get my workout gear. I catch myself whining. It's cold outside. I'm tired. I can't go out in that. It's 59 degrees. I can't go out in February. And stop, flip. 100% of the time when I start my day off with a workout, I have a better day all the way to the gym if I need to. The stop technique works. You need to have an interview with a difficult colleague, or you need to visit with a difficult client and you're avoiding it. Stop, flip, have a different point of view about it. You would get yourself to take the action. The stop technique would work, except for one problem. You won't do this. How do I know you won't do this? Because the part of the brain that would have you do this is called the prefrontal cortex, the orbital frontal cortex, more specifically right here, the left prefrontal cortex. The part of this brain is right behind your eyebrows. Our human brain, this 3 pounds tofu-like, gelatin-like substance, is an incredible energy efficient machine. In fact, everything in nature is energy efficiency. If you take a wand and blow bubbles, they take the most effective, energy efficient shape, which is a sphere. If you put multiple bubbles together, you can do this in your sink with some dishwashing fluid, put multiple bubbles together, they take the most energy efficient shape, which is a hexagon. What kind of an insect is known for hexagons? Bees with their beehives, right? Nature favors energy efficiency, and so does our human brain. And it requires too much energy for us to, first of all, recognize that we have an inhibiting thought. So recognition of the thought, orbital frontal cortex, high energy, inefficiency, recognizing the thought, and then stopping the thought and generating a flipping experience where we have an opposite point of view. That requires far too much energy. And so let me give you an example of how your brain will not let you use that much energy to solve a problem. So here we go. Here's your example. Test number 1. The question is a married person looking at an unmarried person? Dennis is married. Dennis is looking at Jody. Jody's looking at Mark. Mark is not married. Is a married person looking at an unmarried person? Dennis is married looking at Jody. Jody's looking at Mark. Mark is not married. Your choices are yes, no, or can be determined. You're missing some information. So at the risk of, I'm new with this program, so I'm not going to mess with the managing the participants to see hands, but so let me thank you for understanding if you are understanding that, but let me give you what 80% of my groups tell me. They say C, cannot be determined. And so I ask, well, what can't you determine? What's the information that you're missing? And of course, what they give me back is, this can't be solved because you don't know whether Jody's married or not. And that is not correct. The correct answer is yes. A married person is always looking at an unmarried person, and it doesn't matter whether Jody's married or not. So let's look at what the scenarios are. Jody can either be married or unmarried. Is a married person looking at an unmarried person? That's the question. Dennis is married. Let's say Jody's married. Dennis is married looking at Jody who's married. Doesn't meet the criteria. But if Jody's married, she's looking at Mark who's not married. It does meet the criteria. A married person's looking at an unmarried person if Jody's married. Let's say Jody's not married. Dennis is married looking at Jody who's not married. Yes. If Jody's not married, a married person is looking at an unmarried person as well. And so the key here is your brain, if you thought C, your brain recognized a pattern, and then you were hijacked. Your brain refused to allow you to put more energy of this finite energy that we have. Your brain refused to allow you to put more energy into solving this problem, so you can take this finite amount of energy and look out and see your threats. That's human genetic coding, human evolution. We conserve energy. And so that's what's going on. If you can get yourself to use the stop technique, by all means, yes, use it. But I wouldn't count on it. It's too energy guzzling. And so it can't be our one takeaway. There's got to be something else. All right, let's leave this. I have a master's degree in psychology. What this means is I spent a lot of time teaching rats to press down levers to get food. That's always been a lot of fun. So I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, you said that your program is based on science. Will you please go deep and give us some deep science about human behavior? If you're not thinking that in your awareness, you may be thinking that subconsciously. So yes, I will give you some science, but it's going to be simplified. So here we go. Bear with me. And here's what we have. We have a wooden behavioral box, and we have 2 gates here, and we have an empty alleyway, and at the end we have food. Oh, what did I do? Oh my goodness. How did I do that? I didn't want to do that, but anyway, at the end we have food, and we have an empty alleyway, and at the end over here we have rags, and we have a food-deprived volunteer rat. This rat is hungry. This rat wants food. We open up the gate. The rat sees the rag, sees the food, immediately runs up to the right where the food is. Psychologists look at this and they say, a phenomenon has occurred. I don't understand this. How is this a phenomenon? The rat's hungry, the food's to the right, it runs up to the right where the food is. How's that a phenomenon? But you know how psychologists are. How many of you, by raising hands, are in therapy right now? Let's see those hands. Well, let me ask you this way. How many of you should be in therapy? Don't worry about it. Don't take any notes on this, but let me describe what's going on. It's called the desire-driven phenomenon. What that means is when there are no obstacles, the organism will focus on its goal. Now, remember, we started the program A in reference to white. It looks darker than B in reference to dark. The rat is in reference to the goal, to what it wants. When it is in reference and paying attention to what it wants, it takes the action necessary. When there are no obstacles, it will be focused on what it wants. And I hear this and I say, so what's that have to do with human beings? We all have obstacles. How many of you had an obstacle to overcome just to come to this webinar? How many of you are sitting next to an obstacle during this webinar? Anyway, so here's what we're going to do. Let's see if we can make this more relevant. We take the rat, put it back in the center, close it off. We don't let it eat. What we do is we place a metal grid on the floor, separating the rat from the food. The metal grid by itself isn't an obstacle. The obstacle is the shock, the voltage that we put on the metal grid. This is what the metal grid looks that's what our volunteer rat looks like, and that is what our metal grid looks like. And we have one more device that we put on the skull of the rat. We have something on the skull of the rat that enables us to see in real time how the rat's brain is functioning. And so here's what we do. Now, I don't know how to get that. You should be seeing what's on the screen. Let me see if I can get it off here. Oh my goodness. I am impressing myself. How did I do that? All right, anyway, so where was I? All right, so I forgot what I was saying now. See, I'm an ADHD and I just distracted myself. So all right, so we have a shock on this metal grid. Now the rat, we open up the gates, the rat sees the metal grid. Does the rat know that there is a shock on the metal grid? And of course, the answer is no. So what's the rat in reference to? What is the rat paying attention to? And of course, the answer to that is paying attention to what it wants. It's desire driven, it's looking at the goal, and the rat starts up to do what it needs to do to reach its goal. It gets a tremendous shock, and instinctively, it runs away from the shock over to the nice, soft, comfortable rags. Now, I mentioned a word that I need to spend some time on. The word that I mentioned is the word instinctively. There's a built-in instinct in the nervous system of all of life that's referred to as the survival mechanism. The survival mechanism, now stay with me now, the survival mechanism is the part of our brain that is designed to recognize life-threatening danger and to compel the avoidance. That's what the survival mechanism does. Remember that we had the device on the skull of the rat, and this gives us in real time how the rat's brain was firing. So let's examine the human brain for a second. And I want to give you an analogy of the human brain. The human brain is estimated to have over 100 billion neurons. Each neuron can have tens of thousands of interconnections. The brain is just this interconnected web. Even though it's only 2% of our body volume, it uses about 20% of the body's resources and energy, of course. The human brain, now this is not scientific, but I heard this, that the human brain is said to be more complicated than a Donald Trump hair comb over. I don't know if that's possible, but that's what I heard. Anyway, I want to give you an analogy of the human brain. It's referred to as the triunal brain. So this is a participation analogy. If you make a fist with both hands, put your knuckles together so the heels of your hands are touching, and just hold it up and look at the top. Now, what you see there is the outer area, and that represents the cortex. If you open it up and look buried deep inside, mirrored on both sides, your fingers represents the limbic area of the brain. Close your hands together, and the brain stem is represented by your wrist, which is the autonomic nervous system, heart rate and breathing. And if you look at the top again with your knuckles, that is about the size of the human brain. You might think, well, that's pretty small. Actually, the human brain has about this much surface area. But if the human skull had to be big enough to house that large of a brain, I can only guess at this, that childbirth would be worse than it already is. So here's what happens that's very specific for the human species. As the brain is growing, it grows from the inside out, from the bottom to the top. It folds over and on itself so that you get a large surface area in a very small volume. This is particular to the human species. It is a fantastic evolutionary adaptation. It's the reason why humans rule the kingdom and not the apes. So here's the outer cortex. This is the part of your brain that's involved with planning, with thinking, with analyzing. This is the emotional area of the brain, referred to as the limbic system. You hear a lot about the amygdala, which is the emotional outburst, anger, and so forth. The hippocampus is for memory, and you get all kinds of axons that are extending and interconnected. And here's the brain stem, the autonomic nervous system. And so this is our analogy of the human brain. You can think of it as a reptile brain, the brain stem, so lizard brain, the brain stem, mouse brain, the mammals, the limbic system, and primates, the monkey brain would be the cortex. All right, so here we go. Here's what we're going to do. This time, oh, by the way, before I get into the next part of the experiment, when we look at this brain scan of the rat, we see that the first thing that happened when we opened the gate was that the rat had the visual area was activated. When the rat stepped on the metal grid and got shocked, we see that the limbic area of the brain, that emotional area, and this is what's called a cortical limbic loop. We see the exact brain signature of how this rat recognized danger and avoided for the comfort. Now, let's take a look at instincts, and let's bring caveman in to look at human instincts. The first instinct that I want to look at is this. Imagine that you're taking a hike in the woods with your best friend, and all of a sudden you see a bear. How fast do you need to be? Most groups are going to say faster than your friend, right? Well, you're in the woods and you're hiking, you see a bear. Here's what happens. Instantly, your heart rate increases, your breathing increases, the blood leaves the extremities, so if you're clogged, you're not going to bleed to death. You get a shot of epinephrine, you get a shot of cortisol, you get endorphins released, non-essential activities cease, digestion stops, and you are ready to stand there and fight. It's called the fight or flight response. You're able to stand there and fight as strong as you possibly can, or run away as fast as you possibly can. Why would you be able to do something like this? All of our instincts are for one reason, and that is survival. If I were to ask you from a biological perspective what the purpose of your life is, it's not to do the financials of a company. It's not to have the world economy in place. It's not to have world peace and love and save the forest. The purpose of your life is to pass on your genes. And so any adaptation that's favorable to survival gets passed on. And the fight or flight, the ability to have a non-conscious response, favors survival. Here's an example. Caveman's out there, looks up, sees this, and sprints. Is in a 50-yard sprint. That is driven by the amygdala area of the limbic area of the brain. And after sprinting for 50 yards, then the cortex comes on, and he realizes, he's able to analyze that he just was avoiding this. Now, it favors survival to have a non-conscious response to a life threat. Here's another caveman. This caveman doesn't have that particular gene that has a protein that codes for non-conscious response. This caveman looks up, sees this, and says, is that a pretty kitty? And this caveman gets killed. Doesn't live to pass on the stupid gene. Although, how many of you have family reunions that would dispute that? Anybody? And so, pattern recognition, the ability to have a non-conscious response as an instinct, favors survival. But here's an example of this for you. And this is an example of 5 million years of evolution, of how your brain can take incomplete information and give you a narrative about whether this is a threat or whether it's benign. So when you see this, you see a dog, and you see it as not a threat. That's an example of cognitive misery. Seeing patterns, conserving energy, being able to take incomplete information and make it into something that you understand. We don't see the real world. Let's say somebody's doing a handstand like that. We don't see what really is happening there. What we see, what the reality is that this is energy. We see, there is no difference. There's no separation between you and I and the wall and the computer screen and your desk, your table. It's all energy coalesced into certain vibrations that we perceive with our limited perceptual ability as solid. Jill Bolte Taylor is a neuroscientist, and she had a brain stroke. Her left brain was entirely hemorrhaged and offline. Don't worry about it. She's all right now. Pretty funny. But she noticed that when her left brain was offline, she couldn't tell when her body ended and the wall began, because it's the left brain that gives us the illusion of separateness. The left brain that gives us that chair is a solid, when really it's vibrating energy. But anyway, let's go back to the instinct. So the fight or flight instinct. Now here's the issue. It favors survival, that we have this ability to a fast brain to non-consciously respond to our threats. But the problem is that the instinct hasn't kept up with human evolution, and the instinct operates whether the activating trigger is appropriate or not. For example, you're in your car, somebody cuts you off, and they give you the finger. All of a sudden, your heart rate increases, your breathing increases, you get a shot of epinephrine, you get endorphins release, you get cortisol release, and if there's cortisol sitting in your body for a long period of time, it's very stressful, very destructive, but you're sitting in your car. Your life is not threatened. Do you have a colleague who presses your buttons and creates the fight or flight response? It's an inappropriate instinct that is still operating, even though it's not appropriate. So the problem with instincts is that they don't only operate when they should. Here's another example. Area of the brain called the apostat. The apostat is the area of the brain that signals the fat cells to release a hormone called leptin when it senses that you've had enough to eat. And when you have leptin in your bloodstream, you stop eating and you start moving. Now, there is a delay in the release of leptin. Why is that? If the way that we are today is because it favors survival. Well, let's go back to caveman days. Caveman has feast or famine. Caveman captures a deer. It favors survival to be able to eat well beyond his caloric needs, because it might be another 2 or 3 days before he has a food source like this. It favors survival to delay the onset of feeling full. But today, we don't have food scarcity. We don't have feast or famine. It does no good for us to delay the onset of feeling full. Practical application for you would be stop eating before you're full, never get hungry, never get full. And so let's give you some notes. So define the survival mechanism. And you can see this, this is right in about the center of your notes. So the survival mechanism is the part of your brain that before you take an action, it searches for danger. When it links an activity to danger, it overrides your desire to take action, and this is fast, and it compels you to avoid. This is a fast-acting response. Your conscious mind is not engaged in this. The cortex is not a part of the survival mechanism's avoidance. All right, now, let's go back to this experiment, and then we're going to end this experiment with this. Here's the last thing we do. We remove the shock from the middle grid, but we leave the middle grid. So what's the truth this time? Is there anything stopping the rat from reaching its goal? And the answer is no. We took away the shock. The truth is there's nothing stopping the rat from reaching its goal. But what do you know about the truth? It's not relevant. It doesn't matter. And look at what I wrote into the box, into the off to the right. 3 words: reality versus perception. When reality, there's nothing stopping the rat from reaching its goal, is in conflict with perception, what do you think is going to win out? Perception's going to win out. And when we open the gates this time, here's what we get from the perspective of the rat. We get this. That's right. Now, wait a minute. That doesn't mean why the face. It doesn't mean where's the food. What it means is where's the focus? Is the focus on what the rat wants, the goal, or is the focus on the obstacles and the reasons why it can't get what it wants? And the question for you is, where's your focus? We have a default. We are predisposed to not focus on opportunities to take the actions that we need to take to reach our goals. We are predisposed to focus on the obstacles and the threats. Now, here's the other thing. When we open the gate this time, the rat immediately recognizes the previous experience and runs away. Now, when we look at the brain scan, we see the exact same brain scan of how the rat's brain fired the first time when it was in real physical shock. We see the exact same brain scan, which tells us that the rat remembered it was in reference to the previous experience that was painful and life-threatening. That rat will never go over that middle grid again. What I just described to you is called the science of learned helplessness. What's the middle grid in your way that's preventing you from consistently taking the action you need to take to reach your goals? Where have you experienced learned helplessness. Well, let me give you a couple examples of this. One is about diet and exercise. Now, I also happen to be an expert in weight management, and you don't diet and you don't exercise, but I'm going to use this just as an example here. Let's say somebody intended to go on a diet. So there's our intentions again, and they intend to go on a diet. Before they take action, the survival mechanism is immediately activated, and it's searching the memories. Remember how you searched the memory for that small airplane? This survival mechanism searches the neurological networks for a previous experience with dieting. And it finds that you were on a diet and it was so hard and you felt sick and how painful it was. And so that associates the activity that you want to accomplish with pain, and then non-consciously you are compelled to avoid. So anything that you're not doing, you're avoiding because it's linked to pain. Exercise. How could exercise be linked to pain? It's inconvenient. It takes effort. It's linked to pain. That's the signaling event. Kicks in the survival mechanism, which is fast. You avoid. When I talk to salespeople, what's the mental grid for them? What's the trigger for avoidance for them? Well, they tell me mostly it's the pain is in the rejection. I once heard a speaker say that rejection can't kill you. He said, just count out how many times you get rejected, how many times you hear the word no before you make a sale. Then look at what your commission is for the sale, divide that by how many no's you need to get, and that's how much every no is worth. So every time you get rejected, say thank you for the no, thank you for the $50. No, that doesn't work. That speaker doesn't understand the science. If you were to cut your finger, the area of the brain that would be activated is called the anterior cingulate. If you get rejected, guess what area of the brain is activated? The exact same area. Our brain can't differentiate between real pain and emotional pain. In fact, 80% of hospital beds are filled with what's called psychosomatic disorders. Psycho is the mind, somatic is the body. Real disorders, but emotional pain, emotional stress-related disorders. In fact, if you are procrastinating on any activity, when you think of that activity, if you were in a functional MRI and we had a brain scan, we would see activity in the anterior cingulate associated with that action that you're avoiding. Procrastination is biochemically driven. It's not an emotion that is, well, all emotions are biochemically driven. It's not a moral issue. But anyway, rejection can kill you. We need a different strategy. All right, so this is, something happens when we're avoiding. Now, can I be confrontive with you? I'm going to ask you 3 confrontive questions. Put those blinders on and think of the area of your life that you want to have improvement in. How many of you would agree, first of all, that you know what you need to do? That if you did it, you would have that improvement. How many of you would agree with that? Now, here's my second question. How many of you would agree that not only do you know what to do, but secondly, you are capable of doing it? Now, here's my third confrontive question. How many of you would agree that not only do you know what to do, not only are you capable of doing it, but number 3, you are not doing all that you could possibly be doing to be as successful as you could possibly be in your health, your business, and your personal life? And again, I'll assume that all the hands are up. And I can just feel the love in the webinar. But I need to confront this. It's not likely that you're walking around in your life feeling inadequate about your performances. You're not walking around in your life thinking that you're just not doing all of the activities that you could be doing to be as successful as you can in your health and provide for your family to the best of your ability in your business or in your personal life. If you were walking around feeling inadequate like that, how would your self-image be, high or low? Well, it'd be low, right? What mood would you be in with a low self-image? The answer is you'd be depressed. How many of you have ever been depressed before? I guess the real question is, how many of you are depressed now? Now, there's nothing wrong with getting depressed. Elite performers get depressed, but they don't stay in depression very long. They get back on track into dollar-producing activities. Scientists have studied people who have been in depression for any prolonged period of time, and here's what they find. There's a decrease in the white blood cell count. What's going to happen to you if there's a decrease in your white blood cell count? you're going to get sick. Getting sick is a threat to our survival. Our brain is designed for survival. So when you and I are avoiding uncomfortable activities, we don't see that we're avoiding. We have a very limited bandwidth of perceptual ability. Let's talk about that for a second. We have limited perception. So since we have limited perception, human genetic coding takes it and defaults it, saves it, conserves it to see threats, not to see opportunities. Let me show you some examples of limits of human perception by contrasting to another species. Okay, dogs. Have you heard about this, that a dog can detect a cancer, a derivative in the molecules of a cancer patient long before any kind of a medical diagnosis can see the cancer? And over here it talks about the breath that the dog can detect in the breath of cancer patients. And so let's talk about dogs. How about this? Have you heard about this cat that has a wide breadth of perception that's different than humans? Have you heard about a cat can go into a nursing home and if it can sense death? And it says right here, it says each time this 2-year-old cat would jump onto a patient's bed and purr, each time the patient would die within hours. I'm not making this up. Are you familiar with this? I read this in a scientific magazine, People magazine. But let's examine what's really going on here. Look at that cat's eyes. Look closely at that cat's eyes. You know what's really happening here? That cat's killing people. That cat needs to be put in jail where it can get the proper kind of shock therapy that it needs and deserves. Talk about cats. If you have cats, some cats are just plain evil. You think this was an accident? Cat knocks over candle, causes house fire. I ask you to consider the possibility that that cat was not in a good mood and had a resentment to its owners. But anyway, how many have dogs? I have a dog. So one night I'm at home talking about the limits of human perception, and I've got Sophie on one side, poodles, Sophie on one side, Zora on the other side, and I'm watching educational TV, Family Feud. All of a sudden, Sophie starts to growl. I looked at Sophie, I said, "What's wrong with you?" A few seconds later, front door bell rings. Sophie heard something beyond the human threshold and ability to hear frequencies of vibrating energy. I looked at Zora and I said, "What's wrong with you? Don't care anymore or what?" And so this chart shows how little vibrating energy is available to humans. We see only that small bandwidth right in the center. And Einstein would say that all mass is a form of energy. So if you're sitting at your desk, he would say that your desk or that wall is not a solid, that there's more space in that wall than there is matter, that what you have are protons, neutrons, electrons in a constant circular motion, and the frequency of the vibrating energy is such a frequency that as humans, we see it as, we see this as a solid, but it's not a solid. Speaking of which, a neutron goes into a bar, orders a drink, goes to the bartender and says, "How much?" Bartender says, "No charge." That's really funny. You got to know, though, that a neutron is charge neutral. Another one comes to mind. The past, present, and future walk into a bar. It was tense. That's pretty good. But anyway, frequency of vibrating energy would be, the closest I can give you this of a frequency of spin that looks like a solid would be an airplane propeller that spins so fast it looks like a solid plane. And we can't see on the subatomic scale. And you ever put your pen in your mouth while you're thinking, something like that? You won't do this again after you see this. We see with our limited ability to perceive the head of a pin, there's nothing on the head of the pin. So what we're going to do is we're going to extend beyond human sense ability. Let's magnify. Look at what shows up in a true reality on the head of that pin, well beyond our limited perceptual ability. Keep increasing the magnification. Look at what shows up. Keep increasing. Here now, here's the most common cold virus, the rhinovirus. I've seen it up close. I've seen it closer than that, closer than that. There you go, the rhinovirus. That's where you started. You get the idea. Now, since humans have such limited perception, we go into what's called selective perception. Let me give you, this means that we take this narrow bandwidth of perceptual ability and we default towards seeing our threats. That's the human genetic coding. Let me give you examples of selective perception. I'm going to talk to you about when I was a football coach, and I bought my first car, my first Mercedes Honda. Well, after I bought that Mercedes Honda, all I saw were Hondas everywhere. Did the number of Hondas change? No. What changed was I had an experience in my life that changed what I paid attention to. And what scientists start to realize is, now, wait a minute. We know that we have a negativity bias. We know that we have a narrow bandwidth of perceptual ability. This is not disputed. And we know that it defaults that we see our threats. We don't see opportunities, we see obstacles. And then what they started to learn is that they can influence this by behavior. Because I have, this is an example of this right here, from the perspective that I had an experience that changed what made it into this narrow bandwidth of perceptual ability. I'll give you another example of selective perception and how we can influence away from our default to see the negative. I have a rental property in Irvine, California. It was vacant during the summer, and I decided to put air conditioning in the property and raise the rent. Once I made that decision, what do you think I saw on almost every other page of the local newspaper? Ads for air conditioning. There's an ad. How did they know? The number of ads didn't change. What changed was I had an experience that changed what I was paying attention to. I was predisposed to seeing something that's already out there. The outside world didn't change. What changed was what I was in reference to. When I showed you the thumb tip, that never changed. The outside condition didn't change. What changed was what you were preconditioned to pay attention to. All right, so your ability to focus is absolutely key. So I'm going to give you a test. And this is a test of your ability to focus. I'm going to play a video. This video has two teams of three. One team's wearing black shirts, one team's wearing white shirts, and I'm going to ask you, they're bouncing a ball and they're moving around. I'm going to ask you to count the passes that the white shirt team makes. Now, if you've seen this, it's been on the internet for a while. If you've seen this before, it's a video by Don Simmons from Cornell University. Go ahead and do this experiment anyway. See how you do. The key is to keep focused on the person in the white shirt that has the ball. Go. Count the passes. Keep your eye on the person in the white shirt that has the ball. Don't get distracted. Do not get distracted by the movement. Keep your focus on the person in the white shirt that has the ball. Stay focused. A bounce is not a pass, but a bounce pass does count as a pass. Stay focused on the person in the white shirt who has the ball. Stay focused. Keep the eye. A lot of distractions. Stay focused. And to count that last pass. So there seems to be a difference between the results that men get and that women get. Why is that? Well, the brains are different. Did you know that if you were to go and sell a man's brain and a woman's brain, that the man's brain is twice as expensive? Why is that? It's never been used. That's what I'm told. But anyway, the answer is 17, but that's not what's important. How many of you saw something unusual? How many of you saw a gorilla walk to the center, stop, beat its chest, and then walk off? Now, it's not good or bad, just notice. Now, when I do this in a live group, there's always, it's usually about, sometimes it's half see the gorilla, half don't. But I'm glad there are people that see it because they can verify I'm using the same video. Watch it again, but this time, don't count any passes. Tell me when you see the gorilla. Here we go. Don't count passes, just watch it overall. Look to the right of the screen. There it is, in clear view, unobstructed, very clear. So I know how to go for the next 18 minutes or so of our program. How many of you still have not seen the gorilla? But anyway, the key is here. The key is this, and I'll let you decide what it means if you saw the gorilla, if you didn't see the gorilla. The key is that the successful approach to this is not to see the gorilla. You can try this test again now that you know that's coming. What's happened, if you should be able to look at this and stay focused on the white shirt person with the ball and use attention neurons. Our brain is a series of turn on, turn off, activate, inhibit. That's how our brain works. You can't do a bicep curl without activating the biceps and inhibiting the triceps. Otherwise, your arm would be paralyzed and frozen straight. And so this is a great practice. Just Google gorilla video and then watch that and see if you can discipline yourself to stay focused and not see the gorilla. Play around with it. You're going to love it. But anyway, something happens when you and I are avoiding. So here's the scenario. And this is, I know I spent a lot of time on this, and thank you so much for staying with me on this. And so what happens is I have a goal. I have an intention. Everyone has great intentions. They want to accomplish something. And before you take action, the brain searches like a computer, sees if it's linked to pain. If it is, that activates a survival mechanism. We are compelled to avoid. Something happens when we avoid. We don't see that we're avoiding. If we did, we would become depressed, we'd get sick, we would die. So instead, when you are avoiding uncomfortable activities, instead, what you pay attention to is how busy you are. You pay attention to your obstacles. You focus on your this negativity bias. And there's a word that describes this process, which write this word in the blank of Roman numeral 2. The word is rationalization. Rationalization is the biggest competitor that we have to success and achievement. Rationalization is what you mean when you say, I am my biggest competitor. What is rationalization? Rationalization is internal dialogue. Now, how many of you have internal dialogue? Those of you not raising your hands might be saying, I don't talk to myself. That's it. That's internal dialogue. And it almost always ends in the phrase, you're going to die. So I want to give you a metaphor for rationalization. Do you remember years ago the movie Alien? The astronauts on the spaceship looks up for his cat. The alien reaches down, grabs him by the face, and kills him. This is my metaphor for rationalization. This is my metaphor for internal dialogue. So let me show you this. Again, I stand in front of you and I say, health is my number one value. I say, I'm going to get up at 3:50 in the morning. I'm going to exercise. Set the alarm for 3:50. The alarm rings. The alien is asleep on the couch in my bedroom, flies across the room, jumps on my face, and starts this conversation. Are you crazy? Do you know what time it is? Look, it's 3:50 a.m. You can't keep pushing yourself like this, Bob. You're going to depress your immune system. You're going to get sick. You're going to die. You're speaking all over the country. Sleep in for America. This is what I get. This is what I get. All I wanted to do is get up and go to the gym, and I get assaulted. I get hijacked by internal dialogue. What's it in reference to? Learned helplessness. It's in reference to the activity that I want to get myself to do is linked to pain. And you have this happen as well. So I want to give you a test to have this happen. Now, before I give you this test, it's got a couple parts. What I'm going to do, I'll tell you what the major test is. I'm going to ask you to scream wherever you are. 4 words. I'm going to ask you to scream when I give you a cue. The cue is going to be ready, set, go. And the 4 words I'm going to ask you to scream are, fear is a lie. Wherever you're watching this from, I'm going to ask you to scream as loud as you can, like your life depends on it. The 4 words, fear is a lie, when I say ready, set, go. Notice your internal dialogue. How many of you are saying, not going to do it, not going to do it, wouldn't be prudent, not going to do it? How many of you are saying, well, I'll do it loud enough that it doesn't bother me, but I'm not going to do it as loud as I can? How many of you are saying, well, I just was out of the room for a second, I just got back in, maybe it's got to deal with the rest of the room, I'll be the only one screaming. So the words are, fear is a lie, as loud as you can. As a matter of fact, I'm going to unmute this in a second. And before you do this, let me just ask you to, first part of the test, open your right hand, take a look at it. Now get a grip right on your face. Get that grip right on your face. Feel it digging in. Now, this is the first part. If you don't have your hand on your face, the alien already has you. This is stupid. You're not doing it. There's no hand. If you got yourself this far, take your left hand, grab your wrist. When you pull your wrist off, it's going to squirm. It's going to try to get right back on. So hold it off. It's going to make a popping sound. Here we go. Pull it off. Ready? You feel it squirming, trying to get right back on. You might want to name it when you get home. And I want you to talk to it. Here's what I want you to say. Thank you for caring. Go ahead.
Thank you for caring.
But not for sharing. But not for sharing. All right, so I'm going to unmute everybody, and here we go. When I say ready, set, go, as loud as you can, like your life depends on it. Ready, set, go.
Fear is a lie.
All right. So you are now You are now muted, I believe. Hold on a second. How in the world is somebody unmuted? It's somebody. Okay, so here we go. So now, when I do, it's really fun to do this in a live audience. Not that this wasn't a thrill right now, but and you see, people some groups are louder than others, but every group, 100%, holds back. Why do they hold back? And how do I know? Because if they didn't hold back, they'd still be standing up, they'd still be screaming as loud as they can until they ran out of breath. Well, what caused them to hold back? What caused them was this neurological network that might have been an experience that they had when they were 5 years old and they were embarrassed. And they remember what it felt like to be embarrassed, and they said a rule that I must never feel like this again. And that neurological network was activated when I asked you to do this, and the way that it shows up in your life is what you just did. You held back. You weren't all in. Now the question is, where else in your life are you holding back? Where else are you not all the way in? Another way to ask that would be, whom are you withholding from? And not good or bad, no judgment. But the reason is because that activity is linked to pain or fear. And that might even be non-conscious, but it doesn't matter. So let me ask you this. Who's in control of the choices that you make? Who's in control of the choice that you just made to participate? Who's in control of the choices that you make all throughout your life? Who's in control? Are you in control? What do you really control? Temperature in your car? Volume up on your radio? What comes after this? Who let the dogs out? Now, if I had you unmuted, I would have heard some people barking. Who let the dogs out? Now, how do you know that? I guess the better question is, why do you know that? Do you realize that you didn't practice drill, rehearse to learn that? You were exposed to it. Your brain is making neurological connections moment by moment. And when I said, I gave you an activating triggering event or a stimulus, I said, who let the dogs out? If we had you in a functional MRI, we would see an activation in your brain. If we were doing a PET scan that is sensitive to glucose burning, we would see an area light up in your brain. That's a cell, a real cell that is recognize the stimulus of who let the dogs out, and we would see furthermore a response of its 5 barks. Not only that, but it's very likely that neurons are constantly forming extensions. Here's the cell body, here's an axon extension, here's the dendrite connecting to a neural network of other areas of the brain. It's very likely that you had an extension into the limbic area of your brain because you have an emotion associated with this. Really, it's usually a feel-good emotion. You heard it at a sporting event. What I just described is called brain plasticity. What this means is it used to be thought that the human brain could not form new neurons after the age of 24 or so, but now what neurosurgeons realize is the brain is plastic. The brain is subject to your experience for a lifetime. You can create habits, you can literally rewire your brain on demand if you understand how to do that. All right, so let's leave that, and I'll leave this. I'm not going to play this song. I'm going to go right into this note, and then we're going to end with our one takeaway. And so the purpose of rationalization is to protect me. How does it work? An activity is linked to pain. I recognize it. I'm compelled to avoid, and then I justify the avoidance with rationalization. Now, what I'm about to put on the screen is the answer to the question of what controls the choices that you make. Before I give it to you, I'll ask you to consider something. This is a pen. I'm going to hold it up at eye level and let go of my grip on the pen. If I were to ask you to predict what would happen, you would say it's going to fall. But you're not a psychic or psychotic, so how can you make a prediction like that? Well, because you're relying on a principle, and the principle is gravity. Gravity is a universal principle. Gravity doesn't ask you to understand it or to believe it. By the way, I'm reading a book on anti-gravity. It's impossible to put down. But gravity doesn't care. It doesn't discriminate. Gravity works regardless of your awareness of the principle. Here is the human genetic coded principle that affects all human beings. Here's our motivation. All human performance is either the avoidance of pain or the seeking of comfort. This is what drives us. This is what we need to recognize. I'm going to use myself as an example. And I've got a couple of things going on. First of all, I have ADHD, which I wear this label with pride. Entrepreneurs, ADHDers, to get things done. If you have children with ADHD, it's a blessing. It's not a problem. It can be controlled. I don't wear this with pride. I have bulimia. At least I can say I don't have lystixia. That's pretty funny. Dyslexia. Although I must say I do have a problem with the alphabet, and I don't understand why. But anyway, the way that I handle my ADHD is with structure and routine. I go to the gym. I have a routine of waking up, go to the gym. This is my parking place. This is my locker. If somebody's in my locker, it's LA Fitness. You can put a lock. It's open lockers. There's a lock. If somebody's in my locker, that's almost unrecoverable. I got to find out who they are and get in earlier than they are, because this is my locker. I would have to use another locker. I mean, this is the equipment that I use upstairs. Can you imagine if I go to swim and somebody's in my lane? I would have to swim in another lane. This is just it's horrible. And this is the strongest jet right there in the hot tub. That's my shower. And when I go to breakfast, I say it's going to be the greatest day ever, or the best it could be is a good day. What's the criteria? I look through the window and see if somebody's sitting in my booth right there facing that direction. And one day I go in a restaurant, I've been gone for a week, I have 7 newspapers, and there's only 2 people in the restaurant. Guess where they're sitting? They're sitting in my booth. I couldn't believe this. So I have a backup booth. I'm not obsessed about this. So I go to my backup booth. They got up and they left. What did I do? Well, I gathered everything up. I went over to my booth. As I'm going over there, I'm saying this is not OCD. Should be CDO anyway. The light is better over here. Now, when I'm on the road, I lose my routine. And I'm going to tell you about something that happened about 30 years ago. I'm going to talk to you as if it's present tense. I'm flying from Los Angeles to Newark. Take this journey with me. All I had to eat is what they serve you on the airplane. Can we talk about that for a second? They gave me a box of raisins, this big, this big. I looked at the flight attendant and I said, all these for me? Do I have to share this with anyone? They gave me a bagel this big. I thought people are going to think I'm exaggerating. I kept it. I took a picture of it. That's it. That's what I had to eat. That's what I wanted. I didn't get it. I was absolutely starving. First thing I see when I get into my hotel room, what's operating me right now? I'm operating on instincts. First thing I see is the body recognizes the highest level of pain, which is the hunger, and I see the mini bar. So I go over to the mini bar. First thing I see is a bag of M&Ms. I turn it over. I'm going to see how many calories. 240 calories. But that's not what's important. What's important is how many servings. Look at this. 1 serving. I can have that bag of M&Ms. There was so much love in that bag of M&Ms. Then a transformation occurs. I get on my knees for a more efficient reach ratio. Visualize a shark in a feeding frenzy. Next thing I see are chocolate chip cookies. I just rip that apart. Then I see Oreo cookies. I would never give myself Oreo cookies at home. I just rip that apart. Next I see a row of candy bars. I intend to eat just one. Then it's just one at a time. Then it's all of them as fast as I can. Right behind there's a jar of peanuts. I just happen to glance at how many calories in the jar. 1,500 calories. I eat the entire jar. Over here in the door is a box of Cracker Jacks. I wonder what the price is. Right behind there's a bag of barbecue flavored potato chips. I ripped that. One almost got away. Caught it in midair. Right behind, regular flavored potato chips. Now I have one of nature's principles called inertia. Any body in motion will remain in motion unless acted on by an external force. This almost destroyed my momentum. It's one of these Rice Krispie and marshmallow squares in saran wrap. I couldn't get the wrap off fast enough. I took a bite. I hated it. It was horrible, but I ate it. I ate it all. I ate everything in the minibar, everything. Then I had a Diet Coke. And this is a moment 30 years ago, where I can say, first time that I recognize that I didn't go victim and blame everybody else. I looked at this and I said, I'm a fraud. I'm going around teaching success principles. I'm not successful. I'm 60 pounds overweight. I'm not in a relationship. No one would have me. I'm a fraud. And to my credit, I didn't blame outside sources. I said, it's me. I need more information. I need more training. I had learned to coach athletes at Cal State Fullerton. This was our athletic ability. This was the ability level of all of our opponents. I had learned to teach our athletes to tap into the highest level of their God-given talents and catch our opponents when they didn't. That's how we won 2 conference championships. What I hadn't learned was how to do it for myself. I needed more information. So what I did is I got more learning, more training. My next trip, I had a different dynamic. I told 5 people, if I go in a minibar in this trip, I'll give you $250 each. $250, $250, $250, $250, $250. What's that come to? A lot. I'm going cross country. I am hungry. I go into the hotel room. My brain is designed to see the highest level of perceived pain. What do? I see the minibar. As I'm going over to the minibar, my brain realizes there's a higher pain, and that is the pain of the penalty. I had a specific commitment and I had accountability. This is referred to as behavioral contracting. This is the one takeaway for you. Would you write this down? Instincts trump intentions. I'm looking at the clock. I'm going to need to go about 5 minutes over, but I'll stop at that. And I understand if you need to leave. So what I did, instincts trump intentions. And up until this point in time, I was constantly avoiding the instinct of avoiding pain, and I wasn't reaching my goals. But a behavioral contract changed all that, because if I blow air into your eyes, your eyelids are going to blink. This time you know it's coming, intend not to blink, and I blow air into your eyes. Guess what your eyes do? They blink. Instinct trumps intentions. The instinct, the predisposition to avoid pain, trumps the intention to get the activity and do it. Here's the formula. Specific commitment plus accountability. Accountability equals the check-in over the enforceable consequence. If you look at the bottom of the first page, you have a chance to take this program from entertainment into impact by making a behavior contract, giving it to somebody else, giving it to a colleague. You're using the carrot. The carrot is limited. Everybody wants to use the carrot incentives. We're not motivated to get incentives. We're motivated to keep what we have. Loss aversion. It's the stick that will rewire the brain, physically rewire the brain, and create new habits. If you Google negativity bias, you're going to find this. Rick Hansen talks about this. Something positive happens to you, there is a degree of impact and intensity over time. Something negative happens to you, it's 5 times the activation in the brain. It's longer, it's deeper activation. We are Velcro for the positive, Velcro for the negative, and Teflon for the positive. It makes sense, because we've got to be having a negative application first, because we can't make a mistake. You can always think that this is danger and it not be, and you live another day, but if you don't think it's danger and it is, that's it, you're done. So application, next 7 days. So this looks like this needs to be updated to 7-day period of time. Monday, moment you wake up on Monday to the time you go to bed on Sunday. So for us, it would be, you could do this for today, tomorrow, and the 19th, or you can extend it out for the next week. Specific commitments, forcible consequence, you're using the stick, behavioral contracting. By the way, there's never an excuse not to have someone to hold you accountable. I'm only an email away, and write this down because I'm going to have something for you at the end. info@bobdavies.com, and $100 if you don't do what you said you would do. You are going to avoid the highest level of penalty, the highest level of pain. If it's in the activity, you're going to avoid the activity. If you manufacture this with a behavior contract, you will avoid that by taking the action. A couple of quick examples, and then I'll end. So I am at a networking event. I see the person of my dreams. I intend to go and meet this woman. As I'm going over to meet her, my brain does what it's designed to do, looks and sees, is there any link to pain? And it finds when I was last rejected. I went over and introduced myself to a woman. I said, is that seat empty next to you? And she said, yes. And if you sit there, the one I'm in will be empty too. Rejection. I was a kid that my yo-yo never came back. My mother bought me one walkie-talkie. What was that all about? I went to see a doctor. He said, "Can you help me with rejection?" What did he say? No. When I met my wife, she said, "Come on over." Nobody's home. I went over. Nobody was home, right? My brain remembers all the rejection I am compelled to avoid. And what do? I justify. And I say, well, she's busy. I don't want to be rude. I'll talk to her later. Nobody's happy. Watch what happens when I change. Instead of being in reference to the rejection, I'm in reference to a different pain. I tell you, I'll give you $100. See that woman? I'm going to go meet that woman and give you $100 if I don't talk to her. If you're from Canada, that'd be $75. So the brain continues to do what it's designed to do. I'm walking over towards that woman. My brain is continuing to analyze the highest level of pain. But now that metal grid, that avoidance trigger, is the deal we just made, the contract that just put in place. I am driven by instinct to avoid the highest loss, which is the $100. How do I do it? By taking the action. Everybody's happy. 15 happy years, 18 total. Last example, and then I'll close with some closing remarks. And thank you for the extra 4 or 5 minutes here. And so clean out the garage by Sunday. This person wasn't doing it. Why wasn't he doing it? Because there was no leverage. The only response that he had was the leverage of the activity being the most inconvenient thing, and he didn't want to do it. That's the pain. Leverage that. Whatever the consequence is, doesn't always have to be money, but it made a behavior contract, put a penalty for non-performance, gets it done, and it was easy. Everybody loves him. We have a negativity bias to avoid the highest level of perceived pain. It is an instinct, like our life depends on it, and everybody loves you. So I'm going to show you one last example, and then we'll end. And this is called change blindness. This is a Canadian aircraft. You can tell by the tail. I'm going to change this quickly, and I want you to tell me what is different. So the photo is going to change. Something's going to change. Here we go. See if you can see what changes. All right, if you haven't seen it, let me give you it. Right there, the engine is disappeared. Now that I have predisposed you to see this, you can't miss it. You will have to see it. Yeah, look, you just let's go back. You see, you're predisposed to see it. You can't miss it. That's what a behavior contract does. It predisposes you to see an opportunity to take the action. So what would stop you from using this? Fear of only one thing. Not fear of coins, fear of change. Did you hear about the reptile, the chameleon lizard? Turns green when it's on green leaves, turns brown when it's on brown rocks. Scientists found one that couldn't change. They studied it and they found what was wrong. It had reptile dysfunction. You got to know that, right? All right. So last concept is this. Genetic coding of a chimpanzee and a human being was studied. What they found was there's only a 1.2% different, 98.8% identical between a chimp and a human. A small difference leads to a large outcome. Another example, average baseball player hits 250, which is 3 hits every 12 times at bat, makes about $1 billion. Contrast that with the superstar. Superstar hits 333, makes about 24 million. That's significantly higher. But is he significantly better than the average? How does he get there? 1 more hit every 12 times at bat. A small difference makes a significant outcome. And so what I say to you is to apply this, just do one thing this week, or if you extend it out the next week, one thing that you ordinarily would not have done. And next week after that, apply this to one thing. Be a scientist. Observe what happens when you use a behavior contract. Now here's a bonus. If anybody wants, I can tell you that I'm only going to be doing this today, really. If somebody is viewing this in a few months, this is not going to be available. But for you, for bearing with me, send me an email, info@bobdavies.com, and I will send you a link to a complimentary 1-hour video that really puts this together and shows you how to coach another person. So again, it's only limited availability. So there you go. I want to thank everyone for being on this program. and I'm going to unmute, and I'm happy to stay around briefly. If anyone has any questions, I'll take that. Otherwise, thank you so much. Hope to see you again.
Sure.
Thanks, everyone.
I mean, given
Thank
how
you.
rare it is too,
Thank you.
so.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah, thank
you.
you. Very interesting.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Bob. It was very helpful.
Thank you.